Hang on. I wasn't ready. My nose itched.
3, 2, hang on. So I'll make really good bloopers. This is the Apparently Autistic podcast,
Where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices.
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway,
And Bridget Holloway.
and I am Apparently Autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. Okay, welcome to episode 3 of the Apparently Autistic podcast. I'm Keith Holloway.
I'm Bridget Holloway.
All
Today,
Go ahead.
sorry. Today we're going to be talking about meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout.
And like we talked about before, we've touched on these topics a little bit in the last few weeks, but today we are going to dive deeper into each of them. We're going to talk about what they are, what they aren't, and kind of give some experience, some of our own experience, some examples, and things like that. So let's start out with autistic meltdown. What is autistic meltdown?
Well, we're first going to briefly define each, and then we'll go into each subject in more depth later on. So, autistic meltdown is an intense response to an overwhelming situation, usually brought on when someone becomes completely overwhelmed by the current situation and temporarily loses control over their behavior and responses. That's from the National Autistic Society. It's not, they say in that same place, that it's not a temper tantrum, bad behavior, or manipulation, and it can last from minutes to hours.
Right. Okay, autistic shutdown is kind of like the other side of the coin from meltdowns. It's triggered in the same way, but instead of an intense outward response, a shutdown will look like a failure to respond to outward stimuli, a diminishing of all activity, and a slowing of cognitive ability. It's like a feeling of being completely detached from reality. Before, when we talked about burnouts, meltdowns, and shutdowns, I had it backwards. I had it wrong. Like I didn't fully understand it. What I referred to as shutdown is burnout. And I kind of thought it went meltdown, burnout, shutdown. But
Like
it's,
progressively.
Yeah, but it's meltdown or shutdown. And both of those will bleed over or can bleed over into burnout, or burnout might just, come on by itself. Yeah. And I think you can have a meltdown and then go into a shutdown still. But the shutdown isn't really burnout. Burnout is a lot longer.
Yeah. Autistic burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without adequate supports. It is characterized by pervasive, long-term, typically 3 or more months, of exhaustion, loss of function, and reduced tolerance to stimulus. It can be weeks to months long.
Right. So burnout is not something that's like they'll get over in a few hours or even a couple days. That's more of a long-term thing. And then before we go into each of them individually, like do a deep dive, there's a couple of theories that kind of help conceptualize energy management and overstimulation, which both affect meltdowns, shutdowns, burnouts. Like understanding these theories can help predict burnout or meltdown, any of those things.
Yeah.
So the first one that we're going to talk about is spoon theory. And we first heard about this when Bridget was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Yep.
And it's pretty common amongst a lot of people with chronic diseases.
Yeah.
So go ahead and give a basic overview of spoon theory.
I found this handout that I'm going to have you display on the video. But I will kind of overview it because I thought it was a really great way of explaining spoon theory briefly. First of all, your daily energy supply is represented by spoons. You get a certain amount for the entire day. In this example, it says you have 12 spoons to get through the entire day. And then as you go through about your daily tasks, you're basically trading off these spoons to be able to have the energy to do these things. That's your budget of energy for the day. And waking up when you're slow, stiff, whatever the case may be for illnesses or something going on with your body, usually it's being stiff or sore, and just waking up alone is there's a spoon. You gotta use one of your 12 spoons for that. And then you go about your day and showering, your sore muscles, you're stiff, you're having a hard time getting going, just getting ready for the day. And that's going to cost you 2 spoons. So, I mean, right off the bat, you're already down to 9 and you still have your whole day to go.
That's 1/4 of your energy supply getting up and getting ready. Yep.
But then you got to get out of the shower and get dressed and whatever else you got to do. So there's 2 more spoons, and now we're down to 7. If you're going to make yourself breakfast to take your medications, that's another spoon. And then if you have to go to work or whatever, your daily tasks are, say you go to a job and it costs you 3 more spoons. And then your remaining spoons at the end of your workday, you have 3 spoons, and that's to get you home, to get dinner made, to do whatever you have to do with your family, to get ready for bed. And the theory is such that you can borrow spoons from the next day, but then you're already starting off behind for the next day. So it's kind of this cumulative thing. Like in your case, you can go on, you can do a day trip with your family, but it takes extra days to recover because you've taken spoons from future days and past days and all of the in-between. So that's kind of
the point is that there are limited spoons. If you borrow from the next day, or if you save up spoons or whatever, you still have a limited number of spoons. So you've got to make it up somewhere. So adapting the spoon theory to autism it still very much explains energy limitations for us. I think it comes into play because the less energy an autistic person has, the more difficult it is to regulate. Okay, so regular activities cost spoons, even in the chronic illness model, but when you apply it to autism, the amount of spoons an activity costs can be affected by the amount of spoons already left. So, for instance, if I wake up with typical amount of spoons, let's say 12 spoons for me, and I have to start my laundry, that's going to cost me some spoons. But I started out with a decent amount of spoons, so however many spoons that cost me, that's just, it'll cost me that. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well.
Okay, let me see if I can help. So say you wake up in the morning and you have laundry you need to do, and you have your allotment of spoons for the day. You get your laundry started, 1 spoon, like that. It didn't cost you as much. You're rested from the night. You're just starting your day. But say you have laundry you need to do, but you didn't have time to do it this morning, so you're going to do it after work. But you go to work and you've spent some of your spoons and you had kind of a rough day, so work might have been an extra spoon today, but you still have to get your laundry done when you get home from work. But because of your mental state and the energy that you've already exerted, and you're already low on spoons because you've had kind of a rough day, now doing your laundry is going to cost you 2 spoons because it's just going to require more effort.
The same thing can be applied to things that tend to affect people on the spectrum or who are neurodivergent more than the average person, like changes in plans. Same idea. If my plans change at the beginning of the day, I have a lot more spoons, a lot more energy to deal with that. And so it ends up costing me fewer spoons to deal with that. But again, if I've had a long, busy day and then plans change at the end, like it might cost 2 or 3 spoons versus 1 spoon early on. So I think that's a pretty good explanation. I'd written out a whole lot more, but I think we've kind of explained that pretty well. But understanding this is like the concept that the fewer spoons I have, the more spoons it's going to cost me, can help people understand how something seemingly small can snowball for an autistic person really quick and drain their energy.
Or even something that you handled fine when, like, it can be a similar situation, change of plans. Say, like we get to the store and it's closed. One day you may be able to handle that fine, but on another day when you've used more of your spoons or you're running in a deficit from something else we had going on that was big that week, you might not handle getting to the store and it being closed as well.
Exactly. And I can tell you, like, I can physically feel the energy drain from me sometimes. Like when I'm already starting to get overstimulated and something like this pops up, change of plans or whatever, it's like I can feel it, the energy just draining out of my body.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, okay, now I have no energy to do anything now.
It's kind of strange though, because after years of watching for signs and stuff like that, I can almost see it as obviously as you say you feel it, because it's like I know we're going down that hill. It's like, okay, what's our escape plan?
It's almost like it's almost as if it feels almost like all the blood just rushing to my feet. It's not actually the blood rushing to my feet, but I can feel this something just running right down. Okay, so the other theory is the stress bucket. So go ahead and give us some of the basics of the stress bucket.
Okay, so the stress bucket, everyone has a bucket, and it represents your capacity for stress. Water, the water that you put in the bucket, represents the actual things that are stressing you out. Each bucket has a tap on the side, so think of like a spigot or a faucet for releasing the water, and it's at the bottom to prevent it from overflowing out of the top. So
that's like a good way to understand. That in general explains everybody's stress. You know, if you get really, really stressed, you need to find a way to relieve that stress, to reduce that stress. Everyone has heard about stress reducers, stress relievers. That's not a strange concept. When it comes to autism, though, first off, we usually start out with a smaller bucket than neurotypical start out with. The amount of water that gets poured into the bucket is also larger compared to neurodivergence. We have water pouring into our bucket over things that neurotypicals won't even think twice about.
Yeah, not even on the radar.
We have a lot more experiences and situations that will pour water into the bucket. And then finally, the tap at the bottom may be smaller. You could think of it as clogged maybe sometimes. Either way, we have fewer capacity to reduce that stress as easily as neurotypicals might. And
I don't know what the word for this is, but it's almost like as it gets heavier, as the water gets fuller and the bucket gets heavier, the spigot is less effective too. Like it can't function the way it's supposed to because the water's too heavy.
Right. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like the more full the bucket is, the less effective the spigot is in emptying the water. And then, so what happens when the water gets to the top and starts overflowing?
When the amount of water being added to the bucket exceeds the amount of water that it can hold or that it's draining at the bottom, you basically get a meltdown or a shutdown. It could go either way.
Meltdown or shutdown. That's pretty much, you have exceeded your capacity to handle it.
Yep.
And that's when your body goes, nope. And like you said, either a meltdown or a shutdown.
Yeah.
So now let's go ahead and dive into meltdowns.
Yeah. Briefly, meltdowns. As stated above, meltdown is an intense response to an overwhelming situation, causes the autistic person to temporarily lose control of their behavior and responses. It can be a verbal loss of control, like shouting, screaming, saying hurtful words that you don't really mean. And then
so like what does verbal loss of control look like for me? We've kind of touched on this before. I'm loud. That's most of my meltdowns is a verbal thing. I'll yell, I'll scream mostly. Again, a lot of that is caused by that physical tightening of my chest that I feel when I'm going into a meltdown. It's almost like it pushes that out. I know sometimes when I'm in meltdown, I'll say things that I don't mean, and it's like watching myself. Like part of me is watching myself say it, and like, oh, I don't want to be saying this, but it's just coming out, and I can't stop it. Like what's your perspective on it? Because I only know what it's like to be in my body when I'm doing that.
Yeah, it's just loud, and it's one of those situations where I want to be really careful in this forum, because I think it's so important to empower people to, like, you can set your boundaries, you can keep your space safe. It's important for everybody to have a safe space, including like the autistic person and the neurotypical person need to have a safe space. So, you know, early on, before I understood what these meltdowns were or how to handle them, sometimes to me that was a boundary. It was like, okay, this isn't a situation I want to be in. And I just by nature don't really do yelling very well. So so to me it's just a lot of noise and tension is how I would describe it. Fast forward after processing it for a while and seeing what it really is, to me it's like sad, because I see like almost the anguish you're going through, and I'm able to tune out the noise now and hear the message. Hear what got him to this point and what is he actually saying. Like what the real message is. And
now the dogs are being weird.
But now I'm able to take the situation and basically filter out the noise and hear what the message is, which actually helps me navigate the situation and help you come out of it better, or at least, you know, get through it, and then we can work on the recovery. So
for sure. Yeah, I think that was a big turning point in our relationship when another reason why a diagnosis is important, to understand what's really going on. Because once you had a better understanding of the fact that I've lost control now. So what I'm saying is not what I want to be saying.
Yeah.
And what I'm feeling is like, I wish I could explain that to most people. If you are watching someone having a meltdown and it's uncomfortable for you, which I'm sure it is, I promise you it's like 10 times more uncomfortable for the person melting down.
Yeah.
We are not having fun. We are not doing what we want to do. We're not saying what we want to do. Sometimes we're saying things that we know will hurt the people that we love, and that makes it that much worse.
Yeah.
Like, it is not a fun situation overall, no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and kind of as an aside, and I'll touch more on this later, but I think it's important during those situations. Like, I'm not expected to, and nobody is expected to, sit around and I'm not supposed to sit here and let you say hurtful things.
Right.
It's not an attack.
Right.
It's not okay. And I've set those boundaries. Like, if we were in a situation where you were saying hurtful, attacking things to me during a meltdown, I would remove myself from the situation. You know that's not okay. And your meltdowns do come out as a lot of noise, but it's not a personal attack.
Right.
And it's okay to set those boundaries and for that not to be okay.
And even understanding myself better, even when I'm in meltdown and I'm losing control, I have that, and I kind of have an explanation for how meltdowns feel that I'll go into later. But we've lost control, but there's just a tiny bit of control that we can do. And it's like, it's all the energy we can do to control it. But understanding myself better now, a lot of times when I realize, okay, I'm just out of control, I will try to leave the room. I will try to just, and it comes off. It looks like storming off. Slamming the door. But I'm trying to remove myself to just be like, okay, I need to get out of the situation, because I don't want to be doing this either.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be yelling at people. I don't want to be saying some of the things they're doing.
Yeah.
There's verbal loss of control, and then a lot of times with meltdowns, there's physical loss of control. So, what does that look like?
Physical loss of control, I think for you.
Well, just in general first, like for
so
regular
like,
autistic people,
it just in general. I mean, it could be lashing out, kicking, hitting, biting, flailing. Like I've seen head banging. I've seen, like just punching, just like some kind of physical outlet for all that. Yeah,
for all that pressure,
tension and stuff that's built up. Yeah.
And even sometimes just running away. Yeah. Especially like when you have younger kids with higher support needs, that's a concern sometimes. They'll just lose physical control when they're melting down to the point that they'll just run away. They'll take off and that can be scary. Yeah. it's important again to understand that they have lost control. When they are to that point, they have lost control. This is not, they're not a violent person. That doesn't make them a violent person. It means that in that moment, they have lost control.
Yeah.
And for me, this is something that I think is a lot more rare. Like physical acting out, and when it is, it's towards inanimate objects, or it's in a way that hurts me and nobody else.
Yeah.
Like, I think the environment that I grew up in, I had to suppress meltdowns, or like, even when I was at a meltdown point, I couldn't let it explode. And that's what most of my life where I've said that I felt like it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then there's a huge explosion, is because I'm not allowed to let any of those meltdowns out until it's too late. And I think growing up, having to suppress that is pretty much what has made most of my meltdowns verbal. It's just a verbal explosion.
Yeah.
It's a lot of noise because it's all that pressure. But I mean, whether my mom understood it or not, if I were to physically act out having a meltdown, and I may have done that when I was younger, like that would have been the end of it. Like,
yeah,
my parents would have put an end to that real quick.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. Like,
no,
you want to protect, like if someone's lost physical control and they're hitting or biting people, you want to protect the people.
I have.
What?
No, I just have something to add for that when we go into like intervention and how to help. So
like, yeah, like I said, if I'm losing physical control when I'm melting down, it's usually things that are going to hurt me. When I was in high school, I remember punching a wall one time, or I punched a fire extinguisher door and made my knuckles bleed. Like that's pretty much usually the most physical I get.
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me. Like,
I've seen you hit a wall once and it dented it. Like, that's the most physical I've ever seen you be. It's usually something like slamming a door or storming off, or I don't know. Like, and I'm thankful for that. But again, it's okay to set boundaries. Like, let's give you an outlet that helps you relieve that physical tension. But it's okay for me to say that I'm not that punching bag. Right. I'm not, it's not okay for you to hit me. It's not okay for you to take it out on me. But I understand that those are physical things you can't control. Let's find a way for you to get that out.
Yeah, for sure. So, let's talk about how do you respond? Let's say you're a neurotypical parent, you're a partner, you're even just a bystander. And that's why, like in some of the promos I put out for this episode, this is an episode that is good for anyone. Yeah. You don't have to have a neurotypical or neurodivergent child. You don't have to have, a partner that's neurodivergent. You don't have to have any connection that you're aware of in your life to autism. But there's people who are autistic that you interact with, probably on a daily basis. And they may or may not know they're autistic themselves. But it's very possible and likely that you will at some point see someone having an autistic meltdown or going through autistic burnout. And so that's why it's really important to, like, I feel like this is one of the most important episodes.
Yeah.
Even though it's only our third, so that's not that hard to it's a really important episode to help people understand this, because this is one of the biggest barriers, I think, for autistic people.
Well, and on that note, I was doing some researching to try to help people understand, like in the workplace, in public, how do you respond to these things? How do you react if you have a family member or somebody in your household, or say you're at a family party and it's a second cousin that's there and you're not usually around them and something happens and you don't know what it is. So, like, I think it's important for us to all understand better. But some of the things that we can do just as everyday people in everyday life, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, when we see somebody that's struggling with meltdowns or whatever, remain calm and provide a safe space. It's a safe space that we've referred to many times. within your own home, you should feel safe, and the people that are there should help you make that be a safe space. But even in the moment, if they're not in their safe space in their home, they need to feel supported and like that space in that moment is safe. At least to get them to start coming out of it, they need to feel safe. That there's just no other way around it. That is a required element.
And I think it's important to understand, you can't stop a meltdown once it's started. A meltdown has to run its course. What you can do is try to create an environment or a situation where it's not going to be worse. It's not going to be lengthened. It's not going to be whatever. Like, you're not going to be able to stop it cold. You're not going to be able to do anything that's going to make them go, oh, okay, actually, I'm totally fine. The meltdown is going to have to run its course.
Yeah.
But like you said, if they feel like they're not in a safe space, if they feel like they're getting, like, one of the first things that I want to talk about is not judging. Like, the first thing that's important is not to judge people who are going through that, because we've already lost control. And now if we feel like we're in a space where our loss of control is going to, have a negative effect, we're getting judgment from people. People are looking down on us. It might negatively affect our job, our relationship, or whatever. That's going to make the meltdown worse. It's going to make it last longer. It's not allowing that safe space for the meltdown to run its course as it should.
I'll kind of go through these because it hits a lot of good points, I think, for people. I'm just going to bullet point them, but remain calm and provide a safe space. Stay composed. Offer a quiet retreat. Guide the person to a quiet, familiar space where you can feel safe and secure. Reduce sensory overload. Turn off bright lights. Reduce loud music or other overwhelming stimuli. They may not even notice you're doing it at the time, but the more of those things you can pull out, the better off they're going to be. Avoid physical contact or loud noises. They can increase the person's stress. So trying to restrain them or trying to, just avoid physical contact and adding to the stress. You're going to speak in a low, calm voice, maintain a soothing tone, and communicate reassurance. We're going to help you. We're going to get through this. That's... and then keep your distance. Give them space to regulate their emotions. All very important things. One of the number 2 is validate their feelings and offer support. Acknowledge their emotions. So again, okay, what are you feeling? Let's validate what the part of that's valid, and then let's work through. Avoid judgment or criticism. Meltdowns are not intentional and are a sign of overwhelming emotions. Offer reassurance. Let them know they're not going to be rejected or punished. Suggest calming activities when appropriate. Weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones, favorite stim toy. Be patient. Recovery from a meltdown can take time. And then identify and remove triggers. We kind of already touched on this, but turning off noises, lights, things like that. Make accommodations. Minimize triggers. Okay, hang on. Oh yeah, minimize triggers to create a supportive environment. If possible, address the trigger. You can remove it or offer a replacement that's less overwhelming. So, if possible. Communicate effectively. Use visual aids, gestures, or devices if needed. And then other helpful strategies. Encourage self-regulation. This is like learning techniques in advance. And then in the moment when they're having a meltdown, reminding them of that. Okay, let's do your counting exercise. Let's do the grounding exercise. Let's do this thing that you've worked on. Because in the moment, they may not remember. But if you can be that voice of reason and that voice of calm to help them go, okay, yeah, let's try that.
Yeah.
Then.
Well, and I want to say here, these are all really good things, and some of them are good for like after the meltdown. Some of them are good maybe by themselves. Just listening to the list to me is overwhelming me, and I'm not in meltdown. So you don't want to be like, oh, you're in meltdown. Let's go down this list. Let's do this. Let's do that.
No.
Like, you don't want to do that at all.
Yeah.
The biggest thing you want to do when they're in meltdown is focus on the things like removing the stimuli,
right.
Removing triggers, stuff like that. And also understand, like, one of the things you said was address the initial trigger. One once something has triggered a meltdown, fixing the trigger will not stop the meltdown. So that's important to understand. Obviously, it needs to be addressed still. But if I'm melting, like if I've actually reached meltdown over something and then you fix that thing, yeah, the meltdown's already going. It's not going to come to a stop. So don't be frustrated or feel like, well, how can you still be upset? I fixed it. Because once the meltdown has started, you're not stopping it, even by fixing the thing that caused it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the trickiest things with adult autistics is navigating these situations, and it takes some practice, and I could definitely be better at it sometimes. But you're working with adults. Like these are grown adults. You're not parenting, or this isn't a child. You're not talking down to them.
Right.
You're working with them to help them solve a problem. And that's help them solve a problem. This is something they're working through. So you're a support person, and that's something that you have to remember. So that's just like a constant reminder.
Anything where you're like, let's do this, let's do that, when they're already melting down is
you're definitely not going through a checklist. These are just like some ideas, and it does say in here each person is so individual, and you have to see what their needs are, and you might use one or two of these techniques in a situation, but it's definitely not something that you're gonna, okay, now we need to do this. So yeah.
And
that's important thing.
If it's someone that, if they're your partner, they're your child, over time you get to understand how their meltdowns go, and so you can better understand what things you can do to help them during the meltdown as they're coming out of it, like when they're recovering from it. You'll start to learn these things as you better understand it, and then pay attention to their meltdowns and better understand their meltdowns. You will kind of be able to understand it. Like, I think when I melt down, there's always, if it's a meltdown, I'm gonna be loud first. Like it's almost like I hit this point where I'm like, okay, that's it. Can't hold the volume in anymore, and it's gonna be really loud. And then usually I get out whatever I need to get out, and then try to get away. I'll retreat to the bedroom usually. And it's almost like sometimes I'm almost trying to put myself into a shutdown just to, like, okay, we'll deal with this another way. And sometimes I'll go into shutdown. Other times I'll just be sitting there like still seething in a meltdown, but try to remove myself from the situation so that I can start to allow it to run its course.
Yeah.
And sometimes again, like you're usually pretty good at understanding that I need to just be able to get away. And then eventually you come and check on me, like, are you okay? And usually I'm laying in bed, probably have the lights off,
Yeah.
trying to just get rid of all the stimuli.
Right.
But
just something like it's, the next thing you have on here, and it touches several times in the materials I found, but judgment is the biggest thing. Like I'm not here to judge you when you're going through that. You're going through a hard time too. So I'm either here to help, and if I'm not here to help, if I'm here to tell you how you should behave or act,
then get out of
here. Then you're better off not to try to help.
I'm like, I don't want to sound like too jerky or direct about it, but hey, I'm autistic, so I'm going to be direct. If you see someone melting down, I don't care whether you think they're autistic, if you don't think they're autistic, if you know, don't know. If someone is melting down, and especially they're just being loud, if you're not willing to be understanding and accommodating or whatever you can do, then just leave them alone. It's none of your damn business to be judging people, telling them how they should be behaving, telling them that they're behaving badly or anything. It's not your business.
Yeah. And
it's especially frustrating for autistic parents with young kids who are melting down in grocery stores. Like my sister has told me so many times, her son would have a meltdown in the grocery store, and then people will act like, oh, well, I taught my kid how to behave. If you feel an urge to say that, shut your mouth. Nobody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
You're not helping anyone. And
I even hate the word behave in this sense. It's not a behavior, it's a response.
Right.
And I have a hard time even saying how someone's behaving associated with meltdowns or burnout or shutdowns, because it's just a response.
Yeah. Behavior is more like, it seems like there's more choice behind a behavior.
Well, and behaviors are used more to try to achieve a result.
Right.
And
Right, and that's the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. Too.
yeah,
A lot of people
yeah.
say, "Oh, you're just having a tantrum. You didn't get your way, now you're throwing a tantrum." No, that's not how it works. Because again, with a meltdown, if I'm melting down because something isn't a way I expected it to be, or there was a change of plans or whatever, you could change it back to what I was expecting. It's not over now. The meltdown has started.
Yeah.
And it's got to run its course. A tantrum is a kid who wants a piece of candy. Parent says no, so they throw a fit, and then as soon as they get the candy, they're fine. That's a tantrum. And they are not the same. And again, who cares if it's a tantrum? It's not your kid. Mind your business. Like,
yeah.
that's one of the things that, like, I feel like can't be said strongly enough. There's way too much wanting to judge other people, wanting to feel better than other people, without having any understanding of what that person is even going through, what they've been through, nothing. Like,
Yeah.
And
I think that we all need to kind of adopt the mindset as far as this goes of, if you can't help, at least don't make it worse.
right, exactly.
And it's the first do no harm, It's like a very basic thing, but don't make it worse.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with not understanding what's happening,
Or not knowing how to help.
not knowing how to help, or even being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should be watching a kid going through a meltdown and be like, yeah, this is fine, nothing wrong here. Like,
Yeah.
I get that it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but understand that they don't have control, and they certainly are not responsible for your comfortability.
Yeah. And commentary and
Right.
judgment just makes it worse.
Yeah.
So let's just not make it worse. If there's nothing else we can get from teaching people about autism, it's just don't make it worse.
Yep. This kind of goes into what I was going to talk about. Like, I promise you, and I've said this before, we are not having fun when we are melting down. We are, like, it is extremely painful, like literally, physically, emotionally, mentally painful. If you've never lost control and almost been in a state of mind where you're watching yourself, it's terrifying. It really is. And especially in my case, I was a late diagnosed autistic. Once I was diagnosed, I looked back and realized how often this happened. And so understanding it helps me understand it better, but it terrifies me, because I'm like, here we go. Here's another situation that could cause major disruption in my life, because in the past, I grew up in a place where I had to suppress my meltdowns until I absolutely couldn't. So there's that build up, and then there'd be a massive explosion, a massive meltdown. And that has caused job losses, that has caused relationships to come to an end, that has caused all kinds of problems for me, because nobody knew what was going on. Nobody understood what was going on. And so once you get yourself in that situation, if you're melting down again, it's terrifying. Like I said, we're watching ourselves say and do things that hurt others, hurt the people that we love, and we cannot control all of it. I described meltdown to you this way one time, to try to get you to understand better. So imagine that you're in a runaway car. The brakes don't work, or barely work at all. The accelerator is stuck, and you have very little control over direction. You have to put an extreme amount of effort into the steering wheel to try to get it to move anywhere. Okay. And this means that the best you can do, if you're going through this runaway, or in this runaway car, the best you can do is to avoid running over people and causing serious harm to people. You want to, best you can do, okay, I'm not running over people, I'm not plowing into houses. When that car finally comes to a stop, what happens to us? We get judged and yelled at for leaving tracks on the grass and in people's flower beds and knocking over mailboxes. And people don't understand that it took all the energy we had to not run them over. Like, the damage was done, and we're aware that the damage is done. But, it's a terrifying situation for us to be in. We did the best we could. We feel like we, saved lives. Not that it's that extreme, but, we felt like the little bit of control we could exert over our actions, we did to prevent much serious harm. And if you don't understand that, all you see is the knocked over mailboxes, the tire tracks through the yard, the destroyed flower beds. You don't understand that it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So we
kind of already touched on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Just like the judgment, just give them time. Meltdowns they have to run their course. We already talked about that.
Like we've said before, meltdowns are preventable. But once a meltdown has actually started, it's not. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
The best you can do is try to allow it to run its course without getting worse or running longer than it needs to.
And preventable in the sense of when you figure out what your triggers are, you can find ways to avoid them. But I wouldn't say like it's within reason to say that you're going to avoid having a meltdown ever again.
Oh, no.
Because there's new triggers or there's new things that come up or new situations. So I just want to be clear in that once you figure out what is causing your meltdowns, you can prevent them. You can put things in place to help navigate and make sure that you don't have those same issues again and again. But we're not sitting here saying, oh, you can never have a meltdown again.
Right, because you can't ever anticipate everything that's going to happen.
Right.
And if you think about it, a lot of autistic people were really good at pattern recognition. So if we're really good at pattern recognition and we still get surprised by things that put us into meltdown, we're not expecting you to be able to anticipate anything that might cause our meltdown either. And it certainly isn't anyone's responsibility to do that. But yeah, you can try to prevent some meltdowns. You can try to lessen them, but yeah, you can't stop them once they've started, and you're not going to be able to live a meltdown-free life for the rest of your life. I don't care what situation you're in. You could be a billionaire who has all the money in the world and can do whatever you want. You're gonna have meltdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other things that when I was reading up for this one about how to help is calmly asking the person if they're okay. And if they're melting down, it's not necessarily the worst idea to talk to them at all. But you need to be talking calmly with them. You need to make sure that there's no judgment in your tone at all.
Yeah.
Because whatever judgment, even if it's a slight bit of judgment, we're going to pick that out.
Yeah.
And just ask them if they're okay and understand that they may not be able to respond to you at all. And if they do, it may be delayed. So ask them if they're okay, but then just let them kind of guide that response.
Yeah.
You already touched on making a safe, quiet space again too.
Yeah.
If this is happening in public, you obviously can't just take them to their safe space right away. But what you can do is try to reduce the overwhelming stimuli. Try to help other people understand that they just move along. Like there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to stare at.
You're in a busy mall food court and something happens to overstimulate, and you can go to like one of those hallways, like a more quiet space. But I mean, obviously they're not going to their home, their safe space, but it's a more you just do the best you can in the situation. It's not going to be ideal all the time, but try to help out in any way you can.
Yeah. So we talked about possibly being able to prevent a meltdown, and obviously the best way to do that is learning how to anticipate them, understanding signs that show up, because meltdowns don't just appear out of nowhere. Like very rarely have I hit meltdown without a whole lot of warning signs ahead of time. And usually when we're starting to show those signs, some people call that the rumble stage. It's like, think about a volcano that's got all this pressure building up and it's going to eventually erupt, but it starts rumbling beforehand. That pressure starts creating this rumble, and it's very similar to leading up to a meltdown. So even if you haven't been able to identify the triggers that are even starting to lead that way, once you see the rumble stage, you might be able to identify what's going on and try to reduce that. So what are some signs of the rumble stage?
Pacing, seeking reassurance through repetitive questions. So they may ask the same question over and over again, rocking, or becoming like still, like almost statue like just kind of freezing.
I know for me, one of the things that you can probably tell I'm starting to get overstimulated, even if I'm home. We have recliners that rock. If I start sitting in my recliner and just start rocking, like I'm starting to rumble. Like
your squeak sometimes when you do that. Huh? It has a steady squeak that you'll be like just moving your foot at the same rhythm, and it'll squeak every time you do that. Something else I've noticed about you, and this is more in public, not at home, your eyes get darty. Like you start looking around, and I think you're looking for an escape route. Whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously, I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
I always have this situational awareness that I'm not sure if it's just my autism or it plays into from being a firefighter. A lot of the jobs that I've had to kind of had my head on a swivel. So I'm always more aware. But yeah, when I'm starting to get overwhelmed in a public space, that's probably exactly what I'm doing, is looking for an exit. And you can tell when I found one too, can't you? Because I will just start taking off for the exit, and it's kind of like, you guys can catch up to me when you get there, but I'm leaving now. And if we're in a store shopping, it's not uncommon for me to say I'm going to go sit in the truck.
It kind of goes in phases, because when we go in the store, it's like, okay, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it this time, and then we'll start picking up a few things, and then at some point you're like, okay, I'm not handling this super well, but I'm going to try to keep pushing through, and then the next phase is, okay, what else do we need? Like you'll ask, okay, what all do we need to do while we're here? And I'll tell you what we need to do, and then if anything else comes up on that list, it's like, okay, I need to get out of here.
Yeah. Well, because we could go to the grocery store with a list of things that we need. And it's like, I'm going into the grocery store prepared to get everything on this list. I can get through this list, we're good. But if you go grocery shopping with Bridget, the list is never the only thing we get.
Because seeing everything reminds me of
things.
What we need.
We need that. We need that. And that is what leads to the, okay, when I'm saying what else do we need, I'm saying you need to put a cap on this. Decide the last few things you need, and let's get to the end of it. And if it's not like judgment, but it's like, if your response to that doesn't make me feel like, okay, you're going to come up with 3 more things and then we're going to get out of here, then I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to go sit in the truck. And
Which is totally fine.
Yeah, it's not anger at you. It's not frustration with you. It's just understanding, okay, I don't know for sure how much longer this is going to last, so I'm just going to take the exit now.
Yep.
And we both understand that now, so it's a way that we can deal with it.
Yep.
Okay, so talking about the rumble stage, like we said, if someone's in the rumble stage, it's still possible to prevent a meltdown at that point. Some of the things that they suggest: a distraction or a diversion, a fidget toy, soothing or safe music. Like I've got certain songs that I could just play on repeat, and it helps me feel good. Sometimes it's movies. There are certain movies that I could put on that help me feel better. Or removing the triggers, or like escaping the triggering situation, like we're talking about in the grocery store. If I'm to the point of saying, what else do we need? That's a big rumble.
For sure.
That's a really big rumble. And so if it's clear that we're going to be there for a little while, then I'm going to get out.
Yeah.
And that is a good way to escape it.
Well, and it's always, I try to look at it in a situation where, like, you very well could be like, you know what, I just don't do well in those situations. I'm just not going to go to the store with you. Like, every time we went to the store, if you would either stay home or sit in the car, and I would completely understand that. Part of me feels glad that you're even willing to try. Like, you're willing to put yourself out there and put in the effort to try to help out. So when you say, okay, I'm done, I'm okay with that. I'm like, okay, you tried, you did everything you could, and now you're saying, okay, I'm out now.
It's funny because that's one thing I've known about myself for a long time. And I remember even doing that in my last marriage. And that was one of the things that actually like wasn't a problem. Same thing. Like I would just have to be like, I'm going out to the car. So let's talk about some rumble stage things. We told the story about the lunch container in a previous episode, but let's assume that nobody's watched our previous episodes. Tell them the lunch container story is a great example of a rumble stage that was caught
and intervened
and prevented a full-on meltdown.
Yep. We had these Tupperware containers that you used the same size one every day to take. I think it was sandwiches. Was it your sandwich container?
Yeah, I think it was.
It basically fit a sandwich perfectly, and it made it so it didn't get crushed in his lunchbox. And so he'd make a sandwich and put it in the container and pack it in his lunch. And he went to make lunch one night for work and said, "Where's all my sandwich containers?" And immediately I knew there were some in the fridge with leftovers in them, and there probably weren't any clean in the cabinet. So I knew there were bigger containers in the cabinet, and I was just like, you can just move the leftovers from one of the containers in the fridge into a bigger container so you can use that to take to work. And it just was not processing. It was not computing, and he was getting frustrated, and I don't know what I'm going to do for lunch now. And so for me, in that moment, it was super easy to go into the kitchen and move the food to the bigger container and wash out the sandwich container for him and just hand it to him. And his whole night was back on track. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have what I need now. I can get ready for work and we can go.
Amazon wants to be a part of the podcast, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah, you can almost think of that situation like the movie, was it Ants or was it A Bug's Life? I don't remember. I think it was A Bug's Life, where the ants are like going along and something drops in front of the line of the ants and they're like, I'm lost. Like they have no clue. And then someone has to come along and be like, nope, here, go around it this way, and then you can keep on. It was kind of like that. It was like, mm-hmm. I hit a barrier. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. It seems really silly to people who don't understand, but I was like, boom, nope, there's no solution. My day's ruined now. And you were like, nope, here.
Yeah.
Pretty simple thing we can do to fix it. And It was very much a rumble stage that was identified and prevented the meltdown.
Yeah.
So, but what do we want? Like, we don't want to wait for rumble stages, obviously.
No, I mean, like setting up things that help you plan your life, like just having the containers and mm-hmm. the routines and the, like you've done checklists before, things that help you keep in order and on track so that you just feel like your day's going the way it's supposed to go. Yeah, just identifying those things that trigger you and eliminating them as much as possible, or planning around them and figuring out how to navigate them ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. So let's say, okay, if you're a newly diagnosed and you're just understanding this, or you're a parent of a newly diagnosed child, it can be difficult to understand these triggers. So what a lot of people recommend is that you actually keep a diary of meltdowns, whether it's of your meltdowns or your child's meltdowns, your spouse's meltdowns. You want to document what happened before the meltdown, what happened leading up to it, what happened during it, and what happened after it. Like how did it progress? How did it go? What happened? Mm-hmm. When and where did the meltdown occur? Try to come up with any of the stimuli that you think was going on before the meltdown. Usually, if it's after the meltdown and it's an autistic person, we can probably pretty much tell you everything. Like the lights were too noisy, and I could hear the refrigerator running, and the dog 4 houses down was whining. Like like we can tell you a lot of those things that lead to it. And then over time you're going to see patterns emerge, and you're going to start to understand. You're going to see some similarities amongst a lot of these situations, and go, okay, these are the things that are going to lead to a meltdown, and that helps you better set up like their world to try to reduce that as much as possible.
Well, and tracking things like sleep patterns and mm-hmm. diet and things like that maybe, when you haven't eaten for a certain amount of time, I know that I get hangry. Mm-hmm. So, like those things just add to it. And if you're like tracking, okay, well, they haven't had a very good night's sleep for a week. So
Yeah.
that kind of explains why we've had a meltdown the last 3 days in a row. So yeah, it's
And it, you know, like
all
we
these
talked about the
things.
spoon theory earlier too. Like it's good to understand, you know, maybe this is something that we want to try to tackle early in the day when we've got more spoons, so that it costs us less spoons, versus waiting until the end of the day when we're already running low on spoons. So now it's going to cost even more spoons.
Yeah.
Just understanding some things like that. A big thing that's important for autistics to feel like they have control over is how their day goes, and allowing them to organize it the way that they feel most comfortable with. That might mean, you know, they're not the one who's going to get up, eat breakfast immediately, and then go brush their teeth.
Yeah.
Like, they might just have to do things in a different order or put things off or whatever. So yeah, you can use that diary, use that that documentation that I did to understand what is going to trigger a meltdown and to try to prevent it. There are some businesses and organizations now that will offer sensory-friendly hours or experiences.
Yeah.
I've heard of some of the grocery stores will do that. They basically turn off the overhead music, they dim the lights. All the TVs in an electronic section, a lot of times they're all running. Sometimes they're not even all playing the same thing. In these cases, they'll just put them all to static.
Yeah.
And that helps reduce a lot of the sensory input.
Yeah.
Shopping is always a big thing for us. Like, I can't do a full shopping trip anymore. If we're going for a full trip, that's not going to work. So we have started using Walmart Plus.
Yeah.
We use Walmart Plus
Grocery
for shopping,
delivery.
and they deliver it. If we have other things that we might normally go to a store for that aren't grocery stores, or that aren't grocery items, we'll get them on Amazon. And I know that there's a lot of people that have issues with Amazon, you know, because it's taking jobs away. And I'm not trying to get into the politics of that, but it is very beneficial to people who can't handle going to stores. And
Or,
dealing with that.
you know, I mean, even if you don't want to support those services, think about the amount of money that we pay for the yearly Amazon membership or the Walmart Plus membership, the tips, things like that. Do you have a friend or neighbor that's willing to run to the store for you and give them that extra money?
Yeah.
Is there a college student that you know that needs a little bit of extra money and they're willing to go to the store for you? Like, use those resources and ask people for help, because even though you may not want to use such and such a name brand service, that doesn't mean that there's not
Right.
options for you.
Right. We're not saying Amazon's the only option.
No.
It's just, it can be beneficial. And yeah, like you said, if you've got people, loved ones, friends, neighbors that would
Yeah.
be willing to help, yeah, spend that extra money on asking them to help you versus paying Amazon or Walmart Plus if you don't want to do that. One of the other things is to try to keep routines consistent.
Yep.
I know that's the biggest thing for me. I have this fight in my head because I have a little, like, I'm ADHD. I feel like my autistic traits are more prominent than ADHD traits. But there is this kind of back and forth of, I need routine, but the ADHD side of me wants the chaos. I still know that overall the routine is more beneficial to me, and I'm a lot better regulated when I'm able to follow my routine. And I have a lot more routines than people realize. Like, a lot of them are just quiet ones that I just keep doing in my head, and nobody pays attention. If someone were to follow me with a camera from the time I get out of my truck to the time I sit down at my desk at work, they'd realize just how regimented my arriving at work routine is. But it's just the little things that help me keep things consistent and start my work day off with the least amount of surprises and whatever.
Well, and I think there's something to be said even for if the routine or the plan is to not have a plan.
Yeah.
I know that early on we took our kids on a vacation, and you had the days planned out and you wanted to do this, this, and this. Like, you had checklists of things you wanted to accomplish each day, things you wanted to see. And it became frustrating because when you're traveling with a handful of kids, and they're younger, like, things don't go according to schedules. Weather comes up, other people's plans change, schedules change. So I think one of the biggest things you realized with our next vacation that we planned was once we get there, everybody can just do what they want to do. And it was like the plan was to not have a plan, and we were able to enjoy ourselves so much more.
Yeah, so this was our Universal trip. My only thing on a checklist was get to go to Harry Potter World and, experience that with the kids that were Harry Potter's fans. And honestly, we all came out of that more Harry Potter fans than we went into it because of how fun it was.
It was a lot of fun.
But yeah, I remember that was a conscious choice of mine to not make
we had so much fun.
Restricted plans. We did. We spent a lot of our time just floating around the lazy river at the resort.
Yeah.
And oh man, that was amazing. So yeah, understanding yourself, understanding situations. Like I want routines during my day, but yeah, if I'm going on a vacation, I've learned that it's best to try to not. And even our most recent vacation was still kind of the same way. We had a few specific plans, like we had a dinner reservation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was kind of like, let's just go and see what we can do.
Right.
What fun we can have.
Yep.
If you do have like regular routines and there needs to be a change, the biggest thing that you can do to help the autistic person is, number one, give them as much advance notice as possible. Let them know, okay, we're going to have to change it. And then explain to them why. Whenever we ask why, we're not challenging anyone. We're not saying we don't agree. We're not, it's nothing like that. We just want to understand it. If I understand why my routine has to be changed, I can better regulate that and deal with it versus you're changing my routine and you won't even tell me why. No.
Even as a neurotypical person, and I've even said it a lot lately, if something comes up for me, make it make sense. Explain to me why I have to do this so I can, one, remember it, and two, have motivation to apply it to my life. And you're no different, but it's it's just for different reasons. But that was one of my big things is somebody in a support group had said, my house needs work on it. How do I get my husband to agree to it? Because he just sees it as money. And I was like, you just have to make it make sense to him. You have to explain to him the value of what you're adding to the house and make it worth the money that you're putting in.
Yeah.
And you have to make it make sense.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, we covered meltdowns a lot. And the good thing is, like we said, we talked about shutdowns. That's the next thing we're going to go into. But again, shutdowns are the flip side of the coin of meltdowns. So it's triggered in the same way. It's very similar in that, like, once somebody's shut down, you're just going to have to let it run its course. You're not going to be able to stop it. I can think of like one or two times when I think I went into just straight into shutdown. One time, it was several years ago, and I just remember zoning out, sitting in a chair in our room. And it was Christmas time, and it was in the room where the Christmas village and the Christmas tree were set up, and the train was going around the tracks, and the lights were flashing and doing their thing, and it was like I had been so overwhelmed, I just sat in there and just almost went catatonic. I think just shut down, and I think you even came in and were like, "You okay?" And I was like, "I don't know, I don't know. I don't know if you even remember that."
I don't remember that.
But again, it's sometimes described as like a catatonia. It almost seems like the person has completely separated themselves from reality.
Yeah.
Some signs of it, if they look or feel dazed, sleepy, or just non-responsive, that's a good sign of a shutdown.
Yeah.
And again, since they're basically just the opposite response from a meltdown, you can use a lot of the same strategies and understanding going into it.
Yeah.
That would apply to meltdowns. So we talked a lot about meltdowns. We don't have to talk as much about shutdowns because again, it's a lot of the same strategies. It's a lot of the same signs.
Applying them logically, as you see fit. Obviously, meltdown's going to be a more high energy situation, and a shutdown might be more of a okay, they need some space, but they also need to know that they're supported and we're here. So make sure you
Right.
deliver that message, give them the opportunity to talk, and give them space if you can and safely.
And again, like I've said before too, a lot of times I'll melt down and then go into shutdown, and that's a pretty common thing. But it doesn't have to start with a meltdown. Sometimes you'll just go into a shutdown. So then the last one, burnout, as we talked about, it is a mental state resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without adequate support. So that's the big thing for me is the chronic life stress. It's having to mask. High masking takes a lot of energy, and having to do that in situations you feel that stress, that will just build and build and build. The mismatch of expectations and with abilities, like nothing is more frustrating when someone says, "Why can't you do that? You should be able to do that."
Yeah.
Well, I can't, and the stress of that can build up and build up until you get to a burnout. And again, the thing to understand about a burnout is this is a much longer term thing. We're talking weeks to months, and it's just pure exhaustion, loss of function. You're even less able to tolerate stimuli. One of the things that I've noticed, if I'm in burnout, my eyesight gets worse. It's like it's such a lack of energy that my eyes can't even focus as much as they can. We had an eye appointment scheduled for me, but I was in burnout, and it was almost like there's no point in me going because
Your prescription's not going to be
yeah,
right.
you're going to fix my prescription for
Yeah.
where I'm at in burnout, and then I'm going to come out of burnout, and then it's still
Yeah.
going to be off.
Okay. Autistic burnout is a state of physical and mental fatigue, heightened stress, diminished capacity to manage life skills, sensory input, and or social interactions, which comes from years of being severely overtaxed by the strain of trying to live up to demands that are out of sync with needs or abilities. That's kind of what you were talking about, is like if you constantly feel like you can't measure up, people think that you should be doing more or that you're failing someone or something, then it's that constant, it's almost like just a constant beat down.
Yeah, and like I said, this is this explains like I've my life pattern that I've seen in the past of building, not being able to relieve some of that stress with a meltdown because I've been taught to suppress it to the point where I can't suppress it anymore and it explodes, and then that almost always would lead to burnout. So you've got the initial explosion of the meltdown immediately followed by a burnout, and that is what would always cause the issues. That was, and sometimes it wasn't always someone else being a jerk because I was having a meltdown and a burnout, but sometimes it was self-sabotage through the meltdown or the burnout. So some of the impacts that actually going into burnout have, it's going to make your health more difficult. It makes your mental health more difficult. If you're in burnout, you're not going to be taking care of yourself like you should. We have a hard enough time taking care of ourselves with executive dysfunction. If you're in a burnout, it's not just not being able to think to do it. It's not having the energy to do it. So like it affects your physical health, your mental health. It like you struggle just with independent living, like just being able to take care of yourself, living on yourself. Certainly struggle with self-belief. Like I'm a loser. Oh, why can't I do this? How come I?
Yeah.
Whatever. There's this fear that the loss of skill that you're dealing with while you're in a burnout, because you lose some of your ability to cope and some of your natural skills. There's that fear that it's not going to come back.
Yeah.
Which definitely adds more stress. And then of course it's the lack of empathy from the neurotypical world that can lead to the job loss, relationship loss, and other major long-term disruptions. It's the people not understanding what's going on, people labeling you as lazy, labeling you as unstable, labeling you as whatever. And it's particularly difficult in the career world because employers just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to deal with this. I only want to deal with employees that are going to sit down and do the job and not cause me any problems. And that's not okay.
No.
But it's a reality that we have to deal with, unfortunately.
Yep.
So what are some of the causes?
Causes of
burnout?
burnout.
Yeah.
Excessive masking, like feeling under pressure to mask all the time, every day, all day. Suppressing autistic traits and behaviors that to appear normal in the neurotypical world and to be accepted.
So yeah, and that's especially true for people who are late diagnosed. Like I didn't know I was masking. I didn't know that it didn't take that much energy for everyone else. It seemed to me that everyone else was able to get through daily life a lot easier than me, and I felt like that was a character flaw of mine. Why is this so much more taxing to me than it seems to be for everyone else? Because I didn't realize that I was masking, that I was suppressing, my normal autistic traits to appear normal to everybody else.
Yeah.
Some of the other causes: difficult and unreachable expectations. Again, from family, from school, from work or church, society in general. In my life, church was a big part of it. Was one of those expectations, because there was an expectation to be perfect, and I think that was a combination of church and my parents, particularly my mom.
Yeah.
But the religion that we grew up in, you're working towards perfection.
Yeah.
And it's an unattainable goal for anyone.
Right.
So especially when you're an autistic person who believes things black or white. So when you believe in the religion, you believe it 100%, and you believe that you should be working towards perfection, but you see that as an unattainable goal. Like, that can create a whole lot of stress and a whole lot of buildup that will eventually come out as burnout, for sure.
Yep. And you can see how that can lead to like depression and low self-esteem, like all these other things that go hand in hand with, the struggles of being autistic.
Right.
It's...
Well, and that's another interesting connection between burnout and burnout is often misdiagnosed as depression. And it's not that there isn't depression there.
Yeah.
It's not that depression isn't one of the aspects that you're dealing with, but it's not the explanation.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand, because depression has different triggers, different causes, and different ways to handle it. And if you're trying to treat someone in burnout with depression, it's not going to work, because that's not the only thing that's going on there. Other causes, like chronic stress from just living in a world that was not made for you.
Yeah.
That's a common feeling that a lot of autistics feel, is I'm an alien in this world, because this world was not made to accommodate me and how I think and work and just deal with everything.
Yep.
Life changes and transitions. Transitions in general are stressful for autistics. When it's a big life transition, then that can add a lot to it.
Moving, marriage, kids, going to college, any major health crisis or mental health crisis, death, like all of those things can be major contributors.
Yep. So it's important to understand what are some of the barriers for people relieving stress, people who are in burnout, or people who are heading towards a meltdown. And the biggest thing, and I had this highlighted for you to talk about, mainly because I might get a little excited about it, but I'm going to talk about it now anyways. It's gaslighting or dismissing people's attempts to explain their difficulties. When someone tries to explain to you that they're having a tough time, the worst thing you can say is, everyone's having a tough time, get over it.
Yeah.
Because someone explaining they're having a tough time is not them trying to diminish any of your difficulties. It's not them trying to say that they have a harder time than you. But like, what they're saying is still very, very valid.
Yeah.
and saying, oh, well, everyone deals with this. All you got to do is just try harder, or you're making it up, or you're exaggerating it.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. Again, if that's what you feel like you need to say in those situations, then keep your mouth shut.
And not just to an autistic person.
Yeah,
in general.
to anyone. Yeah, in general.
In your life, if you find yourself saying those things, don't say them.
Right. Exactly.
Sorry.
No, but it's true. Because sometimes those are things that people say because they don't understand how to respond. But
Yeah.
a lot of times those are things that people say to try to reduce their guilt
Yeah.
for the situation. If you express to someone how something they said or did to you makes you feel, and they respond with "get over it, we all deal with that," they're not trying to help you. They're trying to diminish what you feel and make themselves feel better by somehow casting you as the problem because you won't just get over it.
Yeah.
And that's a really that's a trigger for me for sure.
Yeah.
Feeling like I'm being gaslit by
Yeah.
someone like that.
Yep.
Poor boundaries and poor self-advocacy is a big one.
Yep.
Again, that's one that I really struggled with. The religion we grew up in and the house I grew up in taught me that I had no right to say no. I had no right to set up boundaries. I had no right to advocate for myself.
Yeah.
My job was to obey and do what I was told.
Yeah, your whole life
And
was
not
to
cause problems.
serve the higher power, serve someone else. It's like, I'm not here to
Yeah.
protect me and make my life better. It's,
Yep.
yep.
And a lot of times when you get to a point where you can't set boundaries anymore is because you've tried. You've tried to set boundaries and you've been attacked for it, or been, just any kind of negative responses to you trying to advocate for yourself or set boundaries. Programs people to stop trying to do that. And that is what can lead to a lot of this stuff. An inability to take a break from the pervasive stress. Like,
Yep.
a lot of us will say this, oh, I just need a break. If you're high masking and you're dealing with the situation, say you have a project at work or something, and it's really, really taxing you don't have that ability to just say, this is too much, I can't deal with it, I'll just step away from it. You can't get a break from it.
Yeah.
And life in general, especially, there are a lot of things that hit you in life that you can't stop, you can't prevent, and you can't take a break from it. And so that's going to lead to burnout, no matter what.
Well, and on top of that, there's not resources and support and accommodations for a lot of those situations. So, like, where do you go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That was one of the hardest things being late diagnosed, was trying to think of what kind of resources do I need. Like, I didn't even understand what resources I need. And when I started looking for that, I realized there's not very many resources out there for autistic adults at all. So it's not even like I could go through and be like, okay, these are resources that are available. I could see this one being beneficial, because I couldn't even, there's very little research done into what autistic adults need, the resources that we need available, and there's very little resources out there to help us. So
Yeah. Well, and on the flip side of that, you have an adult, late diagnosed adult, who has learned that they don't have the support they need and they don't have the help they need. So then they become very independent and they want to do everything themselves. And so then when you get a support network, friends, family, whoever those support people are, and they offer to help you, oftentimes people will just shut it down or turn it away. And it's okay to accept that help. That's another thing that you kind of have to get used to.
Well, because part of the reason why you don't is you've had it trained in your head that that's a weakness.
Right.
Asking for help means you're weak, and that's why a lot of people don't do that. So you've got to train your thought to understand that it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean you're weak, and most people won't see you as weak.
Yeah.
There's unfortunately a few people that may have trained you that way. I still struggle with showing emotion. with expressing, especially with expressing when I'm hurt. I struggle with that because that was a sign of weakness in my house growing up that was pounced on. And not just siblings, but parents too. Like if you showed that something they did hurt you, you just gave them another weapon.
Yeah.
It was not used as a, I'll keep that in mind and try not to do that again. It was used as, I'll keep that in mind the next time I want to hurt you. And so you learn to just not express emotion and pain, unless you just can't anymore. And that's what played into a lot of the suppressing the meltdowns and all that stuff. And even so, I'm sure my mom would probably say, oh, you were very emotional. Well, not nearly as much as I probably would have been.
Yeah.
So getting that acceptance, getting that support, just being allowed to be autistic is the biggest thing. Letting people STEM, let them spend time with their special interests. You and the boys have become very understanding that sometimes I just want to watch the same movie over and over again. And like if I'm putting in Gladiator again, it's because I need to watch something that's predictable, that I enjoy, and that is kind of we call it a STEMmy movie. Yeah. Allowing people to unmask. And especially when you have a late diagnosed autistic, you have to allow them the space and the time to even figure out how to unmask.
Yeah.
Because that's a challenge in and of itself. What's the mask? What is me? What's real versus what is, I've just been masking this way so long that part of the mask is melded to my face now and I can't.
Yeah, it's kind of part of who you are, but you almost have to just rediscover who you even are.
Yeah. And allowing autistics to use their strengths. Yeah. There's always these memes in the autistic communities of, I didn't get the good at math autism, I got the obsessed with trains autism, kind of thing. But everybody has strengths, and autistic people especially have strengths, and a lot of times it's related to their special interest. Music is one of mine, and being able to, play music, listen to music, write music, whatever. That's usually one of my strengths, and it helps relax me and helps kind of de-stress and helps prevent or reduce a burnout coming on.
One of the other things that can be helpful is formal supports like work accommodations, therapy, counseling, things like that.
When I started training at my current job, when I went to OJT after our classroom, it kind of was like they basically said, go find someone to train with.
It's on the job training is what OJT stands for. So basically you learn things in a classroom setting and then you go out and start to do the job hands-on. So
like we had to bid for certain shifts to train on. I picked the midnight shift because that's where I'm more comfortable because there's fewer people already. But we were told, find someone that's willing to train you. Well, we were like the third class of 30 in several months. So a lot of the people who in the past were willing to train were getting tired. And it was always inconsistent. It was a different person every night sometimes. Everybody does things differently. None of them are wrong, but teach me consistently. And when we got near the end of the training, we do this one thing that was called what was it called?
Enhanced OJT.
Enhanced OJT, yeah, where they have one of the people that checks everyone off and signs them off at the end. They basically sit with you and go over stuff. And mine went disastrously. It was partly because I was already stressed going into it, so my brain wasn't working. But I think some of the issue was the inconsistency that I had in the OJT. I don't know. And when I said something to the guy in charge of the training, he basically came back and was like, well, something along the lines of, you've got the same opportunities as everybody else, and yada yada. And I finally, decided I needed to advocate for myself. And I said, okay, listen, I'm autistic. I need consistency. I need a consistent trainer. This is something that I could go through HR to ask for an accommodation for, but it's something that really should be standard anyways. Put me with someone. Put me with a good trainer that I am with consistently, that I know I'll be working with this person. They can consistently work with me. There's no catching up, trying to figure out where I am with the other one. Put me with someone consistently, and then I'll, so that I can actually do well. And they did that, and it wasn't even a month later that I was checked out and fine, because I needed that consistency. So I needed to advocate for myself for those accommodations at work. And again, asking for accommodations at work is not a sign of weakness. And a lot of people are scared to do that because they're afraid that that'll get a target on their back or whatever. If you have asked for accommodations at work and then something happens to your employment, you pretty much got a guaranteed lawsuit. And most major companies understand that and don't want that. So they'll work with you.
Well, and a lot of it is how you present it too. It's, I want to be successful at this. I'm doing what I can to put the effort in on my side. This is what I need from you. And as if it's a reasonable thing and you're only asking for an adjustment or an accommodation for you to be able to do the job that they hired you to do and do it well, there's really nobody loses in that situation. Right. So some of it is how you frame it. You can't just walk in and demand, I mean, you can, but I don't know how well it would go for you just to demand, I need these accommodations or else I'm going to sue you, you definitely, but how you present something, like you want them to get out of you what you're capable of. And these are the tools you need to do it.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of, talking about work and other things, these are things that I've always said. I was a union rep for a while at my last employer. Take time off. If you have sick leave and you feel like you need a mental health day, that is a legitimate reason to use a sick day. And they have no right to demand that you prove you have any issue whatsoever. Some people might say, oh, you need to bring in a doctor's note. Okay, do an online doctor or whatever, talk with them, explain to them. And then all you need is a note from them explaining that they saw you. Your job, your employer has no right to know exactly what is going on and why you took that sick day. That doesn't mean take a mental health day and then go to the amusement park and play. Like if you feel like you need a break from, right. If you need a break from work for your mental health, that is a valid reason to take a sick day. And
it's kind of something that we advocate for in our family is, like, we've even told our kids, and they don't abuse it because it's a legitimate thing, but we've had them come to us and say, I really just need to not go to school today. I need a mental health day. And like that, they're no different than us. Like if you need a break, sometimes you just need a break. Yep. So we're no different as adults. And as adults, it comes out as, I need to be off work sick today. Yep. It's not, I need a mental health day, because unfortunately there's still stigma, and then you have to try to explain stuff. And there's no reason for that. It's just, I need to be off sick today.
Yep.
Like, I'm sick. That's it. They don't need any more than that. But it's okay to take that time for yourself, because we all need a break sometimes.
Yeah. And if you get vacation time, frankly, I think everyone should be given paid vacation time. But if you are given paid vacation time, use it.
Yeah.
It's your benefit. That's what it's there for. Do not feel like you need to do the company a favor by not using your vacation time. Because I got news for you. If something happened to you, they'll move right on. They'll hire someone else. If they feel it necessary to lay you off, they'll do it and move on, and they won't have any problems about it. So don't go giving all this loyalty to a company that will literally move on real easily without you, whether they let you go or something happens to you. So take care of yourself. I'm not saying don't do a good job at your work. I'm not saying take advantage of those things that, like, to make them like you're just doing it to take advantage, but use the benefits that you have there. That's what they're there for. And I know using my vacation time definitely helps me relax and and feel better about things. The dogs are starting to get restless, aren't they?
Yep. All right.
Well, I guess it's a good thing we're getting close to the end of it. So the biggest thing too is self-advocacy, taking care of yourself, your health, understanding yourself. That's the biggest thing. Understanding your triggers, understanding your abilities, understanding the boundaries that you need to set, all of that stuff. can help you avoid burnout. She had the wire stuck on her nose for a second.
No.
Okay. I think it's a good time to wrap up. I
Okay.
think we've kind of covered that.
Yep.
Some final thoughts, though, from you. What do you think?
I'm going to give you some of the links, information I found helpful, like websites and stuff for support people or just people in general that want to understand more so that they can navigate situations better in public. We'll put those in the show notes.
Yep.
Any other of the resources we used,
Yeah.
we'll link. But yeah, just continuously learn it. Like even when he was doing research for this podcast, he learned that burnout wasn't what he thought it was.
Yep.
He was mixing up terms. So,
Yep.
like we're here to grow and help everybody else grow. So it's just kind of what this is all about. So
my final thought, again, because I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is a really, really important topic for everyone to understand, not just autistics, not just caregivers of autistics, loved ones of autistics, but everyone. And we didn't even really bring it up in the podcast, but I mentioned it in one of my promo posts. 85% of autistic people, adult autistics, are unemployed. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's because a lot of them have high support needs. So maybe that makes up for it. But the scary thing is that it's the same statistic for college-educated autistics. 85% of autistic people who have a college degree are unemployed. And misunderstandings about meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnouts, I think, play a huge role in that. It is really hard to keep a job when your employer doesn't understand meltdowns or burnouts, or just doesn't want to deal with it. And I think that there's a lot of that happening in this world, and that's a problem. It's not okay. It's something that needs to be fixed.
yeah.
And hopefully educating people about these things, like we're hoping we did with this podcast, will help with that.
Definitely. We spend as much time with our coworkers as we do our families quite often, and it's important that they understand the needs too. So.
Yep, for sure.
So if you guys have ideas, comments, anything like that, go ahead and add them to the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Suggestions.
I love discussion about things. So if there's something we said that you disagree with, go ahead and leave a comment and let us know. And I don't have a problem having a discussion with people as long as it stays respectful and everything.
Like we're willing to learn too.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. We're certainly not here saying we've got it all figured out.
No,
and if you disagree, you're wrong. So if you have a comment, go ahead and let us know.
Yep.
Next week, we're going to dive deeper into masking and what that entails.
Yep.
It's probably going to be something that I'll learn more just preparing for it, because it's definitely, there's a lot to it and there's a lot to understand it, and I'm still trying to figure out what my mask is and what isn't sometimes. So.
Yep. Always a work in progress. So like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. See you later. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.